Inquiry of the chair. It was my understanding.
The senator from Oklahoma.
Was my understanding that I had the 4 minutes remaining on our side, and that Senator Rubio had time granted to him by the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Is that not correct?
The chair is unaware of that arrangement.
Well, what I would simply do is ask unanimous consent that I have 7 minutes to make a statement.
Without objection.
Wait a minute.
Does the chair, is there objection?
If the gentleman can stick to 7 minutes, we have no objection.
I can stick to 7 minutes. I hear the gavel come down, I'll quit.
Without objection, the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma is accepted, and the senator is recognized.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to give some praise to the chairman and ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. The cooperative nature of this committee this year in terms of inserting good government amendments into appropriation bills. It was a real pleasure to be able to work with them and to put some of the oversight results that we've done over the past few years into appropriation bills. And the bill we have on the floor, even though the chairman is supporting the bill, it's not her bill. It's a bill that came to her from House Republicans. And so any criticism I might have of the bill is certainly not directed towards the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. But it's important to be reminded of what the Congress told the American people less than 2 years ago, that we were going to go on a diet. And then a year ago, when we had the Ryan Murray agreement. And let me just outline to you where we are with what we're getting ready to vote on. Because we're about $47 billion above what we agreed to in the Ryan Murray budget. And that doesn't include emergency funding. So this bill, our appropriators didn't write this bill. This bill came out of the House. We understand the timing of it. We understand the process. But this bill doesn't keep our word to the American public, what we said we were going to keep. That's number one. Number two is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee attempted to put bills on the floor. And she was open to amendment process. But none of the one bill was the only one that actually made it to the floor. It got pulled because there was no agreement to allow any amendments to $3.6 trillion worth of spending. None. Zero. And that wasn't her desire. She is a fair broker in this body for what needs to be done when it comes to spending. So I'd make one third point on the fiscal aspect of this bill. When criminals in this country hurt other people, judges throughout the country, federal judges, imply a penalty, and criminals who are convicted end up paying into a crime victims fund. The crime victims fund isn't federal tax dollars. It's individual payments by felons to make amends for damage and injury to people that their crime was cast upon. In this bill is $20 billion worth of false savings. False savings, but the way we calculate it is, since we're not going to spend the money that's due to the crime victims, we're going to say that's going to save us money, and so therefore we can spend that money somewhere else. Well, if you did that on your income taxes, or if you were a corporation and filed that with the S.E.C., it wouldn't take long for you to be in jail. But that's what the appropriators in the House did. And we just got through doing this last December, the same amount of money on the same fund. So what I want the American people to see is, regardless whether you think we ought to pass this bill or not, shouldn't there be some clarity about the integrity of our numbers? Shouldn't we, if we can't meet the guidelines, shouldn't we just admit it and say we can't meet it, rather than say we're meeting it and then create a false set of numbers? Shouldn't we at least do that? I mean, aren't the American people worth that? But instead, we've got $11.8 billion from the Crime Victims Fund and $6.3 billion from the Children's Health Fund, which are false savings. They're not real savings. And so we're not going to be honest. Well, I'm going to be honest. American public, the U.S. Senate, and the authors of this bill in the House will be lying to you if you believe the numbers in this bill. They're not true. And that's not the chairman of the Appropriation Committee that made that decision. That was the House Appropriators that made that decision, to use false numbers to create a false set of achievements. So finally, and I think I'm about out of time, I would say there's one other thing that disturbs me about this bill. We have a mess in the Middle East today. And sitting on the Intelligence Committee and sitting on Homeland Security, I don't disagree we ought to be involved in terms of going after ISIL. But I think we ought to recognize that we created the problem in the first place. We created the vacuum that allowed that to flourish. And I will tell you my assessment of where we are. We now have recognized this threat, and we have a political plan out there, but no real policy plan to confront ISIL. And having just heard from both the head of the CIA and also the Defense Department in response to the President's plan, what I can tell you is we know that something needs to be done, but your government doesn't yet know what to do. And I know there's authorization for monies in here. We need it. We're going to have to fight it. But let's be real clear as members of this body to ask the important questions so that we don't go down a road that's made even worse. And we have the brain power in the Senate and the experience and the gray hair in the Senate to do that. So I would just ask my colleagues to be very careful, not with this. This is going to happen. This C.R. is going to happen. It's a terrible way to run the government. The appropriation chairman doesn't want to run it this way. But let's be very careful on the questions we ask in the future, and I yield the floor, and I thank the chairman of the Appropriation Committee for her kindness in yielding me the time.